And now we're going to get into our offseason overviews for the AFC North. So the first team we're going to start with is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team who needed some wide receiver help after that Deontay Johnson trade. They needed corner. Offensive line needed a bit of patching up, especially at that center position coming to this offseason. Addressing that center division position, they drafted Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. He's an immediate upgrade at center over who they had before. He finishes well through the whistle. He's a good effort player. He sustains blocks very well. He's very physical and he's a great run blocker. He's also a decent athlete. They also drafted Troy Fautanu out of Washington, who is an elite prospect, one of the best, if not the best, tackle prospect in this draft. And I think those two draft picks can help them a lot. This offensive line was not great last year. It was probably around below average range, but I think with these two draft picks, I'm really high on Zach Frazier. I think everyone's high on Troy Fautanu, but I think Zach Frazier is going to be a really good player. I think that these two signings can help that offensive line a lot. Wide receiver wise, they brought in Quez Watkins via free agency. They brought in Roman Wilson through the draft. Um, I'm not a huge fan of this, especially after trading Deontay Johnson. You hope they're going to get some more receiver help. But I think that, yeah, I don't think that wide receiver core is looking great. You want someone like Russ to have a stronger receiver core around him at this point. And I guess if Pickens can take a big leap, then it won't be a problem. Um, but yeah, I'm not too excited about that receiver core. What do you think, Jerry?
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. With the loss of Deontay Johnson, they just don't really have a certified number two, and bringing in only Van Jefferson and Roman Wilson. That's just not
Yeah,
really enough to ensure that Russ will have good targets to throw to. And not to say that Russ is a bad QB, but at this point in his career, he's kind of more of a system guy. So you want to give him as much support as possible. And I think
yeah.
he's definitely a temporary option for them, but I think that with this current offense, that he's not going to have much to work with.
Yeah, so continuing on, they signed one of my favorite moves in the offseason. If you haven't watched that video, go check it out. One of my favorite moves of the offseason, Patrick Queen. A lot of people said he only looked better because he was playing along Roquan Smith, but I feel like I saw a lot of development from his younger days. I think he got a lot better. He was playing downhill more, and I think he played very well. He was sixth among linebackers with a 25.5% pressure rate. So he's a guy who can do it all. They also signed Deshaun Elliott, who is going to be solid depth in that safety room. Peyton Wilson is a draft pick I love. 6'4", 238, 4'4", 40. Good in coverage. He can blitz. He's a tackle monster. I think Peyton Wilson, him doing all this with no ACL still shocks me, man. The guy's a physical freak. So I think he can be a nice depth piece. I don't think he's going to start off rip for them this year, but I think he can be a very nice depth piece, excuse me, for them as a rookie this year. And obviously, the main moves that they made were through the quarterback room. I think that this, even though yes, Russell Wilson isn't one of the best guys in the league anymore, I think going from Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph to Justin Fields and Russell Wilson is a huge upgrade. I think this just gives the team a lot more stability, just a lot more stability, because I think that Justin Fields isn't a terrible quarterback and things aren't going great with Russ. I don't think it's been bad reports coming out of camp about Fields. He didn't have the greatest preseason game, but I think that Fields, I think and Russ is those are two good moves, especially for the price they got Russ at. It was like chicken change. So I think that's a great move for the Steelers. I would give their offseason a B plus. I really liked their move to get the quarterback in, their offensive line retooled through the draft. I am scared, a little scared about the wide receiver help, but I think also with getting Dante Jackson, some more secondary help, I think they addressed their offseason needs pretty well. That's why I give them a B plus. What's your grade for them?
Yeah, I think I have to go with just a middle of the pack B for them. Uh, yeah, like you said, I really like their draft. Troy Fautanu is a baller, and I think he'll be a great plug and play guy for them. He won't need much information or much teaching up to start in this league. But I just think that that receiver problem will be a much bigger problem than you emphasized, and I think that I'm not a huge fan of the QBs they brought in. I mean, I think Russ was a great signing because of the deal they got him on. They paid basically nothing for him. But I think at this point in his career, he's just not the guy that he used to be. And even if he had a pretty efficient season last year, I just don't see that happening in this Steelers offense. And I mean, you know my feelings on Justin Fields. I don't think he's a very good passer, even if he's one of the most electric runners in the league. So I think that they just didn't do enough to fix their problems. So I give him just a B, leaning towards a B minus.
I think I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit there because with how stable this run game is, I mean, with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris in the backfield, I really think they can thrive off of teams not being able to play off them uh, in that running game. Although, yes, I'm not super excited about the wide receiver room. I think Jalen Warren and Najee Harris will be enough threat to hopefully keep this offense more balanced, and I think Pickens can take a leap. So I do think that run game will support Russ a good amount. I think they're going to run the ball obviously more than they throw it, so I think that could help them a little bit. Moving on to the next team, we've got the Bengals.
And that's where I'll take over. Oh, the Bengals? Oh, shit. Well, either way, that is where I'll take over. The Cincinnati Bengals had a pretty solid offseason. Not too much to say in their draft, but they did draft one of my favorite players in the draft, D tackle McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M. I'm a huge A&M fan, so them taking him in the I want to say the third round was a huge one surprise for me. I didn't think they'd really go for him after signing Sheldon Rankings, but I'm glad that they picked him. I think he will be a good player. I think he was quite underrated. They made a lot of big moves this offseason, though, picking up Geno Stone, a safety that they stole from their division rivals, the Baltimore Ravens. He had an amazing season last year. Was a ball hawk and just a great player for the Ravens. They also got some more safety help with Von Bell. They signed the running back out of the Colts, Zach Moss, who is a fantasy legend for many people, including Josh over here. As I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
they signed Sheldon Rankins, who will help them heavily in their run defense because their run defense was very below average last year. Um, they also signed Mike Gesicki and Trent Brown, who I think will be less less major signings. But if Mike Gesicki can get back to where he was a couple years ago, he can be a major impact player for them, seeing as they have a hole in the tight end spot. But even with all that they added, they lost possibly even more. Lost running back Joe Mixon. Not much they could do about that with his whole situation, but that's still a pretty big loss. He was a good player. Lost Tyler Boyd, arguably the best wide receiver 3 in the league. Could be a wide receiver 2, or even on some lower end teams, a wide receiver 1. And he's a very good player that they're going to miss. As well as losing DJ Reader and Chidobe Awuzie, two very big parts of their defense. But they were able to make up for the loss of DJ Reader with the signing of Sheldon Rankings. I prefer DJ Reader to Sheldon Rankins, but Sheldon Rankins I feel is more dominant in the run game, and he kind of is a more sizable D tackle. So I think that that's a fair trade. Um, and they also lost tackle Jonah Williams. Don't think they'll miss him too much because of his history with the Bengals, but that is a notable loss. Um, Overall, I think that the Bengals did have a pretty good offseason, especially with signing Geno Stone, Zach Moss, and Sheldon Rankins. Zach Moss, I mean, I think he'll fit into that missing running back spot perfectly. They needed a running back, and he showed out in the time that Jonathan Taylor was out last season. And of course, he got pushed to the
Mm-hmm.
side when Taylor came off of the injury list. But I think that he can be a great starting running back in this league if he's given a chance. And Geno Stone already proved himself last year as one of the best safeties in the league. So overall, I'd probably give their offseason a B plus. They did lose some big players, but I think that their signings kind of made up for it, and I like their draft as well.
Adding on a little bit to what you said, I really like the pick of Jermaine Burton as the wide receiver 3 for the Bengals this year. He's a really cool tape at Bama, and I think he can develop very well in this wide receiver room. I think with them only tagging T. Higgins for this year, I think that he can take a step into that wide receiver two role next year. But I think this will be a good year for him to develop as a young player. Another draft pick I really liked was Amarius Mims. He's a huge, really raw, athletic prospect. He might get some burn because of Trent Brown's issues to start the season, so he might get some starts. He only had 8 college starts. I used to not be a fan of these Georgia players who didn't have much production or didn't have much game time
Trayvon Walker.
in college. Yeah, so guys like Trayvon Walker. Me and Jerry did not like Trayvon Walker at all. But Trayvon Walker proved us wrong. So I'm gonna try and be on the right side of history here with the Marius Mims and say that he has a bright future. So that's all I really have to say. I think you covered everything else for the Bengals. Uh, Next up, or I'd say my grade for the Bengals is probably I'd say probably a B plus. I think they addressed the offensive line pretty nicely, and they helped with that run defense a little bit. And they drafted wide receiver, which they could use some help in the wide receiver room after losing Tyler Boyd. So I did like their offseason. For the Ravens, I'll take over here. We know about the Ravens. They have a great defense, but they did need some O linemen, some veteran edge rushers, because at the beginning of the free agency cycle, their edge rushing room was looking really young. Wide receiver, which is always a thing for the Raiders, for the Ravens, excuse me, and to bring back Justin Madubike. They got that last part done. Fantastic Aggie alum. Man, he's a
Sir.
fantastic player. He was crazy last year. Addressing the offensive line problems, we have Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. He had a great year the whole year, but in that Michigan game, he was awful. Michael Penix had no time to throw, but I think he's still a good prospect. I think a bad game shouldn't be defining someone as a player. I think he's a solid run block, a better run blocker than he is pass protector, which we saw in that game. But I think that he's a great athlete and he'll translate very well to the NFL. I think they did a good job bringing in some veteran edge rushers in Kyle Van Noy on a very cheap, team friendly deal. I really like that move. And Nate Wiggins with this preseason game. Nate Wiggins, I am high on Nate Wiggins. He looked fantastic in that game. His
Yeah, he showed
length
out
was
against
really
my
on
Eagles.
display. Yeah, his length
Yeah,
was
and I
really
think
on display, and it's looking like at the 30th pick, that might be one of the steals of the draft. Another player you really like, Tez Walker out of UNC. Um, if y'all haven't seen the video, the way Jerry talks about Tez Walker in that video, go check out our underrated rookies video. But I think it's great value for the pick to where he fell. I think he has some great tape. I think he could have a really good year for the Ravens this year. Obviously, the big move of this offseason for the Ravens, King Henry coming over from the Titans to the Ravens. I think this is finally the answer to the solution. I think Lamar Jackson has been this team's leading rusher for so many years in a row now, but I think that load is going to get taken off his shoulders. I think Derrick Henry will be the leading rusher, but I do think this will unlock Lamar Jackson as a runner even more. He has lost a lot of weight, so he's looking more like his 2020 MVP self, which I think can lead to a lot more rushing yards. Him being as electric as possible. I'm really excited for this offense next year. I'm a big fan of Tez Walker, so I'm happy to see what he'll do. Odafe Owe. He's been there for a little bit. He's not a new signing, but he's had an amazing camp from. He had an amazing camp from what's been coming out. But they did lose Geno Stone. They also lost Patrick Queen. Those are two big players. Those are two players that were huge parts of this elite defense. I still think they'll be great, just because that Ravens defense is almost more like a system. Just whoever you put in there will be great. But I do think Geno Stone's losing all those takeaways. He led the AFC in interceptions, and losing him to a division rival is not helpful. Patrick Queen was also lost to a division rival. So we'll see how those moves turn out for them. I don't think it's going to hurt them too much on the defensive side of the ball just because of the Ravens, but I still do think those are some losses. Adisa Isaac is a edge rusher from Penn State who they drafted, who could be a strong depth piece this year. Probably not starting, but could get some burn and make his impact known on the field. Is there anything you'd like to say about the Ravens before we move on?
yeah, man. I mean, they had some big losses, but I think they had, besides for the Eagles, I think they had my favorite draft in the league. You already touched on Nate Wiggins, Tez Walker, and Adisa Isaac, but I'd also like to bring up a guy in TJ Tampa who I also mentioned in that
I
underrated
forgot
rookies
about
video.
him.
You also go check that out. TJ Tampa is a great player out of Iowa State, and I think he just fits perfectly into this Ravens system because of his flexibility. He's mainly a man corner, but he's very good in zone as well. And I just love to see him. Also, Devin Leary out of Kentucky. He's not an amazing prospect, and he's probably not going to get any play time this year. But I just really liked him in college, so I feel like I had to mention that.
Yeah. All right. So now we're gonna move on to the last team. We're gonna go with the Browns.
Yep, and I'll take over from there. We've got the Cleveland Browns. The Browns didn't honestly lose too many huge players. I'd say their main loss was honestly probably Joe Flacco, who had an incredible run towards the end of the season last year, which got ended by the Texans. But main additions, they did get Jerry Judy from the Broncos, who should shore up their wide receiver room. They got Jordan Hicks, who's a very good player. Jameis Winston, who can back up, back up.
Deshaun.
Forgetting his name here,
Deshaun.
Deshaun. My fault, Deshaun. And Devin Bush, Katie York is also a very good young kicker who they picked up. Um, They also lost, Sione Takitaki, who was a very good, very underrated linebacker in my opinion. I liked him very much, and I think that loss could affect them. But they did bring in two new linebackers as well, and Jordan Hicks being my favorite of them. Um, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Cleveland Browns draft. I did like Zach Zinner out of Michigan. I think he's a good guard and has a good chance to get some burn this year. As well as I love Jamari Thrash, another one of those rookies I mentioned in my underrated rookies video. But outside of the two of them, I didn't think they had very much of an exciting draft. Only made 6 overall picks, and most of them just weren't anything special in my opinion. But I am a huge fan of Jamari Thrash, and I think he will have a good chance to get some play time this year, especially with questions around Jerry Judy and whether or not he can hit his
Yeah.
potential. I've never been very high on Jerry Judy. I don't think Josh has either.
He's
But
not hitting his potential.
but he is at least at the very least a starting caliber receiver in this league. So hopefully Jamari Thrash gets a chance to play there. Um Overall, I'm just not a very big fan of the Cleveland Browns this season. I don't think that Deshaun will be able to return to his former glory. I don't think, like Josh said, that Jerry Judy will be able to live up to his expectations as he hasn't for his entire career. And I just don't really believe very much in this Browns team, and I don't think they really added enough to make me believe in them. I mean, obviously their defense was great last year, and they didn't do too much to change it outside of the addition of Devin Bush and Jordan Hicks. But their defense also did crumble in the wild card round, and that's not something to be confident of, especially when their secondary was the best part of their defense. They were getting absolutely fried by CJ Stroud. So I just don't think that they did enough this offseason to make me put any confidence in them. If I were to give them a grade, I'd give them a B minus, maybe even a C plus. I'm just not a huge fan of this offseason outside of Jordan Hicks and outside of Jamari Thrash. What about you?
Yeah. Um, Me personally, I've been a big fan of Devin Bush since he was younger with the Steelers. His career hasn't panned out how I thought it would, but hopefully he can revive it in a good defense like the Browns. I also think re-signing Zadarius Smith was a good move. They re-signed Shelby Harris, so I think the guys that they brought back were very crucial. Obviously, Zadarius Smith was a huge part of this defense. So I think those are some good moves. I'd probably give them a B minus as well. I don't think their offseason was very outstanding. I do like Jordan Hicks, of course. Deonta Foreman is a solid back, but I just don't think it was anything spectacular.